The fire hose of news from America can feel like a lot these days.
If you're trying to figure out what to make of it all, we got you.
I'm Katie Simpson.
And I'm Paul Hunter. We're correspondents here in Washington,
working just around the corner from where much of the action is taking place.
2 blocks from the White House.
And that's the name of our new podcast.
For top-notch analysis of U.S. politics from a Canadian perspective, find 2 blocks from the White House every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts.
Including YouTube.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
It's exactly the kind of deal you think would have the U.S. president's backing. The Gordie Howe International Bridge, financed entirely by Canada up front, used American steel and labor to build part of it, and will be co-owned by the state of Michigan. But despite the Americans getting a new, vitally needed border crossing at no cost to them, President Donald Trump has threatened to throw all of it away at a big cost for businesses already hurting from his tariff policies. I'm Caryn Ceolin, and today on The Big Story, I'm speaking with David Paterson, Ontario's representative in Washington, D.C., about what Trump really wants and why we shouldn't be too focused on the bridge itself. Mr. Paterson, it's such a pleasure to be speaking with you today. Thanks so much for making the time.
Thanks for having me, Caryn.
I guess, can we start with just an overview of the Gordie Howe International Bridge project itself and why Canada built a second bridge? Just if you could speak a little bit to its vital importance to both countries, particularly Ontario and Michigan, why it's so important to have a new Windsor-Detroit border crossing.
Sure. Well, it's been many years in the development, and you may know I, before I came to this role in Washington, worked in the auto sector for a number of years, and so very important to make sure that we sort of keep our supply chains moving. We've had some experiences in the past when we had the trucker event in Washington, or in Ottawa, where the bridge was blocked, and we could see how quickly auto plants right down to Texas could be impacted when we don't see goods crossing the border properly. So I think I'm not an expert in all the background of the different agencies, but in essence, in 2012, there was a Canada-Michigan crossing agreement that essentially set out for Canada to finance the creation of a multi-billion-dollar bridge that would provide redundancy to the crossings that are there. And in the Detroit area, there's a bridge and there's a tunnel, and the capacity of those areas and the age of those crossings made everyone aware that we're going to need to move forward with some new building. And so to make what was a difficult cross-border situation work and move quickly, it was agreed that Canada would finance the bridge. Tolls would pay back Canada for the financing, and then after that was paid off, they would split whatever revenues come from the bridge between the two countries. And so that's the essence of it, and all things were moving ahead, with this obviously being a very symbolic coming together between Canada and the United States and all our trade agreement at a pretty difficult time for trade, as it turns out.
Yeah, you have a very unique perspective because in your previous role, as you mentioned, you worked in the auto sector, and now in your current role, you're having conversations with lots of people in Washington. And so you would have a better sense than most of how the Americans were likely feeling about the impending opening of the Gordie Howe Bridge project. I wonder what your impression is of what led to President Trump to suddenly threaten to block the bridge's opening, because for us on the outside, it felt very all of a sudden.
Well, even here in Washington, it did as well. I happened to, I went home that evening, became aware of the social post from the president. The next morning, I was in Congress meeting, as it happened, with a friend of mine who's a member of the Michigan delegation in the House of Representatives. And we were talking about this topic and the history of it. It's funny because we've had such a year, more than a year, of threats and responses and the trade situation all suffering from that what used to probably be a crisis a couple of months ago was just another Friday. And we had to deal with a social posting that was obviously not factual. But one of the things that was wonderful, the member passed me a copy of Rick Snyder, a former Republican governor of Michigan, was out very, very quickly with a point-by-point response just to correct the president on the various things that were put forward. And what was also readily apparent fairly quickly was that the long opponent of the bridge, the Maroon family, apparently was in Washington at the same time, working with the administration to see what they could do to either change the outcome of the bridge or perhaps interest in becoming part of the revenue stream of the new bridge, or who knows. But overall, I think what's notable is that the issue kind of came and went fairly quickly. The prime minister got on the phone with the president, and we didn't hear that much more about it. And I think that shows that we're at a stage now where we are getting past the upset that can come from these things. I mean, there's always a tendency. I someone in Congress turned to me and said, "Let me remind you of Scandinavian folklore, where the troll was a creature living under bridges who would be looking to harass and lurk and cause trouble." And of course, now trolls live on social media, and I think we were trolled a little bit on this particular threat. But we have to take all of those things seriously. I mean, the question really is there something that could happen that would stop the bridge from opening? Are there things that we need to sort out? And so this comes as just another issue in a pantheon of different issues that we now need to sort of turn the page and get down and solve problems. And so I'm not particularly worried, frankly. The bridge is going to open. The bridge is needed by American industry as much, if not more, than it is needed by Canada. And as Premier Ford said, I was in business. If someone paid for something and I get immediate use for it, I think that's a pretty good deal. And so the bridge will open, but we now have to turn the page and get down to solving problems, because we have a period of time between now and July 1st where we've got to decide if we're going to renew the USMCA agreement. And so I think it's time for us to get past what started back at Mar-a-Lago and the 51st state and the chirps back and forth. It's time to now, throw the puck on the ice and let's get some problems solved.
And I do have some questions for you about the status of the trade file right now, but you alluded to earlier the New York Times story, which seems to have given us a little bit of insight into what may have prompted the president's eruption here. It reported, as you mentioned, that the billionaire private owner of the Ambassador Bridge lobbied Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick. This is a family that has spent more than a decade, billions of dollars trying to stop government efforts to build the Gordie Howe Bridge, which would be a competing bridge, publicly owned. Is it as simple as that, do you think? Or is there something deeper that President Trump ultimately wanted to get out of us by posting that message on Truth Social?
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, who knows what the truth of that is? I think we're smarter to sort of take a big step back and just realize that whether it is the background of really serious things like the 50% tariffs that we've had, some of the responses that are there. We've had upsets over the Reagan ad. We've had upsets over U.S. wine not being bought by the LCBO. We've had Bombardier. We've had the bridge. We've had any number of different things going back to the 51st state. That's kind of the nature of living with this particular administration. We have an expression here in Washington. It's really important to separate signal from noise. And if you only focus on all the noise, on all these issues, you'll never get anything done. So I think the signal is that U.S. Ambassador Jameson Greer does want to sit down, does want to address some issues that have to do with our trade. And what really strikes me here in Washington is how little time is spent focusing on what those issues are. And really, with Canada, there's only about half a dozen major issues that keep coming out from the United States as being issues to be resolved so that we can get on with investment certainty and the USMCA. And so it's really, I think, important now that with the appointment of a new ambassador here in Washington, Mark Wiseman, who's here in the embassy today, and just yesterday, Janice Charest, one of our most successful senior mandarins in Canadian history as the chief negotiator. To me, that's the signal that now it's time to get busy and get negotiating and start resolving problems.
And so this you see as just another blip, as you mentioned, just another day of the week in Washington. You said it's safe to say Trump will back down on this. The bridge will open. Do you think Ottawa, though, will have to make concessions for it to happen?
There may be some issues that have to be worked through in terms of the final operational details of how the bridge will work. I don't know. That'll be up to the federal government and to the Crown Corporation that is in charge of the bridge. We in Ontario want to make sure it opens on time because our most important industry is the auto sector. But so too is our food sector, and so too are all the different manufacturing products that cross those bridges every day. And I can tell you from someone who spent 20 years at General Motors that when you have a problem at one of those crossings, take us back to COVID, take us back to the trucker aspect, it's a problem right through the United States economy. So the thing about trade is it's two ways. And anything that would impact trade coming into the United States on that bridge would be a very big problem for American business. And they're hurting enough as it is with the requirement to pay these tariffs and the uncertainty around their supply chains and just the investment uncertainty in the business community while we work out the rules of the game. And so, the bridge, I would be confident. Put it in a long list of other issues that we have to resolve. Hopefully they are quick. I thought Rick Snyder's article was a mic drop, really addressed all the issues. Let's move on. Let's not get too focused on just the bridge. Let's get focused on opening up our trade.
From where you sit in Washington, where do things stand right now on the trade file? And what are the conversations like that you're having in Washington right now?
It's a really interesting time, and there's a bit of a wind of change, I think. I think of this as kind of a big 3-act play, and the first act is kind of coming to an end. And that first act has been one of all kinds of consternation and chirping and some real problems. It's been a time where Canadians have rediscovered their intense patriotism. It's a time when people have done some really hard lifting to address some real problems in the domestic front. Moving projects forward quickly, etc. And I think we can give thanks for that to be able to make those changes. But with the arrival of Mark Wiseman, with the appointment of Janice Charest, and some things that are quite notable last week. So, for instance, we saw in the House of Representatives a vote that was taken with the support of a number of Republican members to put a resolution forward to say, let's remove these tariffs on Canada. And that's something that had been done previously in the Senate as well. So there are some cracks in the foundation of the tariff approach because people are hurting. And we see that. The thing I always try and keep my mind on here is that trade is not just about bureaucrats and writing agreements and MOUs and all those kinds of things. Trade's done by business. The rules of the road in terms of how much the tariff is and what they're applied, that's really important in affecting things. But what is happening right now is that businesses on both sides of the border are suffering because of the uncertainty. So if you're going to make a multi-million-dollar or even billion-dollar investment, but you don't know that your biggest market is going to be open to you because you don't know what that trade agreement is, it's very hard to justify that decision to your board of directors. And I see that time after time here in Washington. I probably meet with 4 or 5 businesses a day that are coming in or on a Zoom call just to talk about the uncertainty that they're facing and what can we do to get things moving forward. So to me, I think the Congress, I think the public and others are, and certainly the companies are looking for some more certainty. There is another bump in the road that we're going to have to get out of the way, and that's the Supreme Court. So we're waiting on a Supreme Court decision on the IEEPA tariffs, as they're called, or the fentanyl tariffs that were there, and those affect Mexico and Canada. It's widely expected that if they are struck down, they'll be replaced, and then we'll be back at it again. And so we need to get that out of the way. But there's nothing to stop our negotiators from sitting down, just as the Mexican negotiators will be sitting down with the United States and just trying to put some solutions together on problems. And, I don't think those problems are really that surprising. We've talked about them a lot, and they, I think, are eminently solvable if good minds come together. And those include things like access. Americans want to make sure they have access into Canada for dairy products. Of course, they would really like to get their wine and their bourbon back on the shelves of the LCBO. That's pretty easy to do. We've said as soon as those tariffs come down, we'll put the booze back on the shelves. There is big concern about China. In the United States, everything is all about national security, and there's worry about Chinese transshipment of goods coming through the ends of the continent. And what are we doing to prevent that? What about companies that don't follow the rules of origin, which are extremely complex in terms of the USMCA agreement? And so do there need to be adjustments on that? The American tech industry is concerned about digital issues. A lot of American farming is very concerned about getting American corn into Mexico. But these can all be sat down and dealt with. We just need to get going on solving some problems. The core of the agreement, everybody that I talk to supports. They want to see the USMCA renewed. We just need to really bolt onto the side of it some agreements on some issues and be able to move forward. And hopefully we can do that by the deadline of July 1st. And if not, we may have to go into extra innings and see if we can get it across the line.
I certainly take your point on all that, and I don't doubt that there are people in the president's orbit who also take your point on that and know that the American side is hurting from Trump's trade policies, but the president doesn't seem to be listening, at least not in the way that he perhaps listened to the people in his orbit during his first administration. And I just wonder, how do you negotiate with that?
Well, I think the negotiation will be first and foremost with USTR, Ambassador Jameson Greer, to a degree as well with U.S. Commerce on various issues, and then they will take it to the president. And there will be members of Congress that will talk to the president about what they're hearing in their districts, knowing that they have an election in November that is going to, in some ways, pass judgment on whether or not the economy is to their liking. And what I hear from those members of Congress is we want this agreement to move forward. What I certainly hear from the companies, and we saw them on record here in the United States, every one of them essentially saying to USTR, let's renew this agreement. So there's lots of support. That gives me some faith that at the end of the day, if we can solve some real problems, that it will be in the self-interest of the president to move forward. And that's all we can do.
I think that's what also kind of made his comments around the Gordie Howe Bridge a bit surprising for me, is because Michigan is also a big player in the coming midterm elections. They have a Senate seat up for grabs. I just wonder, because you spoke earlier about, the cracks emerging in the political support for Trump's trade policies. Does that also offer you any hope?
What gives me hope is really, number one, is what I say, trade is about business, and making sure that you can maintain your supply chains, that you have ability to have labor to do the things that you're needing to do, and that the rules are going to make sense and not change every 2 weeks with a tweet or with a truth. And so trying to get to some kind of agreement I think there's a resounding consensus here. But we always will take seriously what we hear from the president. There may be some grains of truth and issue that we have to work on in the things that he brings forward. Do I think we're going to lose the Stanley Cup? No, I don't. That was probably the more amusing part of the treat, and other things. Let's take a hard look at them. It's pretty nice and comforting when the first one coming to say this is not a problem is the Republican governor of Michigan, who actually put it in place in the first place. So let's not overreact to these things. Let's not get drawn. That might be the intention. We can live life in a reality show, or we can get down and do business, and I'd prefer to do the latter.
And could you please pass a message along to the president's people that we do not call it ice hockey here? No, I'm just kidding. Just lastly, Mr. Paterson, before I let you go, what lesson are you taking away from this bridge ordeal? And I suppose taking with you into discussions around trade with your own counterparts in the U.S. And do you think the Canadian side should be taking with them at the negotiating table? Is it that the U.S. administration, again, is just showing its willingness that it will use all of its leverage as a weapon against us?
Sure. I mean, I think that anyone who's read The Art of the Deal, and I suggest if you're interested in trade, that's a good thing to do, as is a good thing to read Bob Lighthizer book about the USMCA the first time. There's an obvious style to this administration, but getting drawn down rabbit holes with every truth issue every night is probably not a good use of your energy and your time. You've got to separate noise from signal and focus on the things that matter, and take seriously the issues that are real and come with solutions. I think if we put half as much time into coming up with solutions to real problems as we do fretting about what the latest social media post is, we'd be a little bit further ahead. So that's a good idea, both sides of the border, to do that. It's been a pretty difficult year. We have to take those things seriously. I think we've responded in a way that's pretty helpful to Canada. And I'm really proud that Canada was the only country on the earth other than China that stood up and retaliated and said, look, this is not acceptable. But in our back pocket, we have a bunch of things that America needs, and we know they need them. We know they need our critical minerals and our electricity and our potash and our uranium. All of those things are essential for the future of America. And there are a number of things that we can do together to improve our trade as well. So I think those are the things to focus on. That's what we try and focus on here in the Ontario office in the embassy here in Washington.
Mr. Paterson, a pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. My pleasure. Thanks, Caryn. And that was The Big Story. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this conversation. Send us an email at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca. Reach us on Instagram @frequencypods or on Blue Sky @thebigstory. If you know someone who might enjoy this episode, be sure to send it to them. You can listen to The Big Story every day on the Seeker app or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Caryn Ceolin. Thanks so much for listening.